Hello everybody on Twitch and YouTube. So good of you to join. Hi to today's stream where we will explore TanStack Start, a JavaScript framework. A framework I have actually explored already a couple of months ago, I think. But it was only a brief first look, and back then I was mostly focused on getting better auth to work with it, I think. And I've forgotten almost everything since then. So it's a brand new look at TanStack Start today, and we're taking this look because it is now in release candidate phase or status. So we're getting closer to that final release, I guess. And I'll explain what exactly TanStack Start is, and we'll then explore it together over the next 2 hours or so. So yeah, hi everybody. Super nice to see you all here. And today, by the way, is a great day, not just because TanStack Start is in release candidate status, which is, of course, the topic we'll take a look at today, but also because today, Hades 2 is coming out of early access. So yeah, that's nice too, because it's a great game, I think. I haven't played it yet, but I loved the first part. So yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Bleem. I'm good. I hope you're all good too out there. I hope you're having a good day, good week. And yeah, so today, TanStack Start. It is a JavaScript framework. Essentially, you could say it's an alternative to Next.js and Remix. Or now, of course, Remix is React Router. They merged it into React Router. You can now use React Router either as just a library in your single-page application React app, or you can use it as a framework, which was previously known as Remix. TanStack Start is an alternative to that, you could say. It's a JavaScript framework which brings various full-stack capabilities to the table. That's the idea. Now, TanStack in general is a collection of pretty popular JavaScript or mostly React libraries, I would say. Now, not all these libraries are well known. I certainly don't know all of them. I haven't used all of them. But TanStack Query is probably the most popular one, formerly known as React Query, still often referred to as React Query. It's a library that helps with simplifying the process of sending HTTP requests from your client side to your server side, so from your React app to your backend, so to say. No matter if you're fetching data, if you're mutating data, it helps with caching and all kinds of related tasks. So that's TanStack Query. And the creators of TanStack Query, or mostly the creator, I guess, they also created a couple of other libraries, as you can see. I'm not sure if they're all from the same person, but they have a bunch of libraries. And TanStack Start is now basically their take on creating a full-stack JavaScript framework, and that's what we'll now explore today. Can I create a tutorial for Python in Udemy? Well, I have a Python course on Udemy. Currently, I don't plan on creating a new one, to be honest. I got a basic Python course and I got a Django course. So yeah, right now, no new courses on that planned. So let's dive into TanStack Query by clicking on Getting Started, I guess. And as I said, and I mean it, I have not really used it. I played around with it a couple of months ago. I don't remember a lot, so it's all brand new to me. I will make mistakes, and I have to read the documentation to learn it. Not even an LLM can help us that much, I guess, because it's a brand new framework, a brand new library, more or less. So I'm not sure AI knows a lot about it. Sure, we could feed it into AI, but we'll not do that too much. That being said, though, I just noticed we got a copy markdown button here at the top, and I love it when libraries, no matter which ones, do that, because that, of course, means you can easily copy it and then use it to feed it into your thread, into your discussion with a large language model to ask questions about this page, or to make the the model aware of certain features, of a recommended syntax, and get better code recommendations. Because we will be using Cursor today, or I will be using Cursor, I guess, and it can often help to just put that extra context into the chat and get better AI support, because I am using AI for development. I'm not vibe coding, but I am using AI. Anyways, so it is in release candidate stage now, which means it's considered feature complete. The API is considered stable, but it can, of course, still have bugs, and maybe we encounter some today. We'll see. Now, what I know and what they also mention here is that, in essence, in a nutshell, TanStack Start is that framework which I mentioned, but in a nutshell, it's mostly TanStack Router, which is a library you could also use on its own, just as you can use React Router without its framework capabilities. And then combined with Vite and a bunch of APIs and a bunch of helpers and features that help with server-side rendering, with running code on the server side, so with that fun stuff. And we'll see that in action soon. So yeah, they also mention here, should I use TanStack Start? Well, I should use it if I am interested in all that server stuff here, because that is the main thing it brings to the table. Holger mentions, very interesting to see this. I still think Next.js is easier, and all the code from TanStack feels very complex because it's always very generic abstract. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how it works now. I do remember that from a couple of months ago when I first had a look at it, I had some problems, but also because, especially when I live stream, it's a bit hard to always dive deep into the documentation, because me reading a page for a minute or two is not too interesting. So I definitely missed a couple of things then. But yeah, I guess I see where you're coming from. We'll see, or I'll see how it works for me today. So let's now getting started. And I will use the TanStack Start CLI with this command to create a new project, I guess. So let me quickly open up a new terminal here and cd into my streams folder and run this command to create a new TanStack Start project. And then let's see what that gives us. I do remember last time I used TanStack Start, I created it from scratch. And I think I could still do that, right? There is this build from scratch option where you really create every single file and every configuration file on your own. But I don't want to do this today. I'll happily use the CLI. So what would I like to name it? Explore TanStack Start. RC is my project folder, and I'll not build a super fancy project today. In fact, I don't even know yet what I'll build. I want to play around with the different features and APIs instead. I do want to use Tailwind CSS though, because I do want to have some styling. It should not look like, it should look good. Yeah, we can add linting. Okay, I can now add add-ons, but I don't think I'll use any here. I mean, it definitely would be interesting to bring something like TanStack Form or TanStack Query into the project, but I want to see raw TanStack Start, I guess. So I'll not check anything. Do I want examples? No, I don't think I want that. I want to build it from scratch. Okay, so let me quickly development streams explore TanStack Start. Let's open that. And if I use the chat, I'll bring it over to the left side so that you can see it. If I mean the AI chat here, but I definitely also want to write some code myself. Errors were encountered. npm install did not run successfully. Okay, so I guess we'll do that here then. Let's see, which errors do I get? Okay. Okay, so we got a Vite dependency problem. Let's see. So because it's using v4, and I guess v6 could not resolve dependency. V greater 7. Now, maybe that's a stupid question, but what is the latest version of Vite? Isn't that 4? Oh, it's 7. Okay, never mind. Okay, so essentially it installed 6, but I got something where it wants 7. Yeah, that was Tailwind anyways. So yeah, okay, see. So does it work if I use 7 here? Yeah, I will use Shadcn, Holger. I will definitely use that. I will use Shadcn. But first, let's try to get the dependencies installed here. But I guess it's looking better now. Looks like that will work. Okay, now I hope v7 doesn't break anything. I hope everything works. Otherwise, I'll probably have to downgrade to 6 and force install it or something like this. Yeah, but we'll see whether that works. Okay, so what do we have here? We got a CTA JSON file. I got no idea what that is about. Create React app? Well, prettier ignore is lint package. So there is no TanStack specific config file here in the root folder. We got the Vite config file. And in there, I got the TanStack start plugin. I guess we could configure some things here. But of course, I'll stick to the initial configuration for now. So in source, I then got styles, which sets up Tailwind CSS. I got my router TSX file. Yeah, and I think that is a file I remember that will be generated dynamically once I run the development server, probably. So that gives me no error. That's good. So the file is here. Weird. Now it works. Okay. So let's see. Localhost 3000. Okay, so that's looking good. Got my initial page. Oh, and got some other pages here too. So that might be nice. Hi, Alpha. Nice to see you. So let's see, what else do we have? So we got this router TSX file. And again, I don't know almost anything about this, so I'll have to explore that and see what we got here. What is TanStack exactly? TanStack is a collection of libraries. TanStack Start is a full stack React framework, an alternative to Next.js and Remix, you could say. And it just entered release candidate status. So we got router TSX, and I guess in there, what's happening is it's setting up the router that will be used to, well, route on the server and the client side, I guess. Now, this route tree gen.ts file is generated dynamically, and I guess it will be updated whenever we add new routes or when we change routes. So this is not something we have to work in as far as I remember. Then we got the routes folder, and I think we have to register routes in there. But of course, I don't want to guess. I will take a look at the documentation this time, the routing documentation. And here it already tells me that TanStack Start is built on top of TanStack Router, which again, you could use totally without the server-side part. And therefore, we want to dive into the TanStack Router documentation to learn all about setting up routes. And that, of course, is a pretty big documentation. So yeah, I'll try to find a good mixture of writing code and reading documentation today. So we got the router TSX file that will dictate the behavior of the TanStack router. So that's the file we just had a look at. Okay, we could configure caching and so on in there. And we are doing file-based routing in the source routes directory. And there, I guess we got a certain naming convention we have to follow, like _root TSX is the root route, the topmost route, which encapsulates all other routes. So that's basically the shell of our document, of our application. It has no path and is always matched, right? So therefore in there, we probably find, we find the metadata here, which we want to have, like the viewport metadata, which we want to have on every page. We import the CSS file in there, which sets up Tailwind in turn. We got the HTML skeleton. Yeah, so that makes sense. So that's our shell, our root shell, I guess. Can we use TanStack query in Next? Yes, you can. You can use TanStack query in Next.js. What are the benefits of TanStack? I don't know yet. It might be faster, easier to use. Maybe it has less foot guns than Next.js has, because Next.js definitely has some problems or some potential problems you could run into. But I don't know yet. I'm exploring it right now. So we got the root route. Okay, what else? We got an API route. So I guess, let's see, API routes. I guess just like Next.js, TanStack Start has the concept of having either a page route, which aims to render some HTML code in the end, or an API route, which exposes post, put, get route handlers, which you can send requests to from either your client side or any other client, like a mobile app. I guess that's how it works. That being said, though, I want to see route. I want to see where it explains how we set up an API route. So I'm in the TanStack router docs now because TanStack Start uses TanStack router. So we create a file by using the create file route function. I can see that here in the code too. We got the create file route function, which is imported from TanStack React Router. I now just wonder what turns this into an API route. Is it this server handler part here with get? And could I do that in another route too? So let's say I have my index.tsx file here, which is probably responsible for this. Yes, it is. So that is a page route, I guess. But I guess I could now add server here and add my handlers object, and then also register some API routes here, right? So get, yeah, we need to return a response. So return new response. No, get. So I guess this would not work right now. So what I'm trying to do here, and I'm just playing around with it, is I want to understand how I define API or page routes. Because in Next.js, for example, in Next.js, you do it by, if you go to routing there, where is it? Layouts and pages, is it here? Guides, where is it? File system conventions. In Next.js, if you add a page.js or a page.ts file, you set up a page that will be server rendered where the HTML code will be returned. And if you use route.js instead, you can export functions called get, post, and so on in there. And then that would create an API route, which you can target from some client. And I want to understand how we do that in TanStack. And I guess we do it by either setting up a component which handles get requests and gives us this rendered JSX HTML code, or we register this server handlers object here in our route, and then we can set up get, post, put handlers in there, and those would trigger for incoming requests too, so we can have both in the same file, API routes and page routes. Though a get route in here probably won't work because it's that component that should be rendered for incoming get requests, I guess. I'm probably getting ahead of myself here. It's just something I want to understand because in this starting project, we got files with API in their name. And I guess that's not too important. I guess what is important is the setup in the file. Can we call TanStack start a combination of TanStack router and TanStack query? I'm not sure if TanStack query is included. I guess it is more TanStack router plus Vite-powered server-side rendering magic or stuff. Maybe you have already explained that, but what's the reason of using TanStack in a Next.js project if Next... Yeah, so TanStack query. You could use TanStack query in a Next.js project if you want to use TanStack queries caching mechanism and behavior instead of the caching behavior Next.js gives you, for example. That being said, I typically don't use TanStack query in Next.js projects. It is something I want to play around with a bit more, but therefore I'm not super qualified to praise its benefits here because I don't have a lot of experience with it. Can you zoom in an editor? Yeah, sure. I'll zoom in a bit more. What's the framework? It's TanStack start. Okay, so we got an API route here. We got the demo route here. So that is this one here, I guess. So I added something. If I reload, it's still there. And I guess it is still there because of the logic in these files. Demo start server funcs. What's the URL? Demo start. Oh, okay, I see. So I am on localhost /demo/start/server funcs. And that seems to activate this file, this route, which is called demo.start.server-funcs. So every dot is replaced with a slash, so to say. So you can create nested paths, a route for nested paths, without having nested folders by using dots in the file name. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that, but then again, I'm not a big fan of file-based routing in the first place, even though it probably is better, I guess, but yeah, but okay, that is how you can create nested paths. So that means if I rename this to demo, okay, I would expect that this page no longer works now. And instead, I would expect that I should, okay, going to demo works. I'm not sure why the other route still works. Maybe it's a caching thing. If I restart here. Yeah, I don't know. But going to /demo now also loads this, this route here. Okay, so what do we have in this route? In this route here, we are returning some JSX code, but when I say return, I mean we have a React component here, a standard React component function called home. In there, we're using useRouter, which is coming from TanStack router. We're managing some state, classic React. Got use callback to wrap this function here, this submit to do function, where we call add to do and add the entered to do. So this state is used to keep track of what the user entered, I guess. Yeah, onChange updates the state. So onChange for the input updates the state. And then submit to do is triggered when we click this button. And in submit to do, we call add to do and forward or pass this data, which we manage with our state, to add to do. Now, add to do is a function in the same file. So I'm still in the same file. Add to is a function created with the create server fn function. And I do remember that, I think. Create server fn, create server function, is a function coming from TanStack start, from its React version. I'm not sure if they have other versions, to be honest. And we use create server function by calling it, and then we can pass a configuration object to it, and in this configuration object, I guess we only set the method, which defines for which method, for which kind of HTTP request method this function becomes active, or which method is used for triggering this function, because I'll explain how that works in a second, because I do remember that. So we create a function, and then we create an object, and on this object we can call input validator. So that's a method existing on the object that's returned by create server function. We pass a validation function to input validator to validate the received input. I do remember that too. Maybe we can even use sought there. Don't know. Anyways, here we just validate and we return the validated data. So I guess we could also transform it in there if I'm not mistaken. We're not really validating it, I guess. We're just returning it without checking anything. And then in handler, that's the actual function, the function we pass to handler. That's the actual function that will be executed when add to do is called here. And the interesting thing now is, this here is a React component. The home component here is a standard React component. Add to do is something, a function in the end, that's defined in the same file. And nonetheless, the code in here executes on the server because this entire thing here is created with create server fn. I do remember that. So that's TanStack start's way of basically drawing a boundary between the client side and the server side. In Next.js, you would have a server action, which in Next.js you might recall you create by adding use server in a function, right? And then you can have that function in the component, and nonetheless it will execute on the server. Here with TanStack start, it's the same with create server fn. So this code here will execute on the server. And in there, we're writing to a file called to-dos.json, this one here, which stores these to-dos. And that's how we persist the data. And of course, that's just an example where we write to a file, but we could also be writing to a database. We could be using a database here. And even writing to a file like this with an API provided by Node.js, that wouldn't work in the browser. So this proves that this code here runs on the server, and any other code it calls runs on the server, because if it were running in the browser, it would simply crash because Node.js and its file system and so on is not available there. Okay, so that's how that works. Also, we got create file route here to define how this route generally works. So I guess you need that in every route file. So you have file-based routing, but then in every file you have this code, which defines how this route works. And here we have the path for this route, but I guess that is generated automatically. I do recall that this code is generated automatically. If I add a new route here, a new file, if I add a new file, the routes folder, boom. This is automatically generated. I did not write this, but it is here. So TanStack manages this. And the blinds go up. Okay, so that's how this works. Got it. And then we got a loader here too. It's a concept you might also know from Remix. There you also have actions and loaders. By the way, in Remix, if you're using its server-side capabilities, that's where it draws its server-client boundaries. The action and loader in Remix run on the server side. I do think the loader here in TanStack start actually can run on both the client or the server side, but get-to-dos, the function we're executing here, is a server function, and I do remember that this is essentially means that it will only run on the server side. If instead in this function, we would be returning something else here, like hello world, then this loader could also run on the client side. If we were to do something in there which only works on the server, but I would write it like this, it would also fail if I understand it correctly, because by default this loader could be executed on the client side. If you go to another page and come back, TanStack start might try to execute this code on the client side, I guess. So to ensure that it only runs on the server side, we have to call a function in our loader, which is created with create server function. And that then ensures that this loader only runs on the server side, if I remember correctly. Okay, so I talked a lot, sharing my thoughts. I hope it's interesting. Let's take a look at the chat. Yeah, not a fan of React router and TanStack router. Much of the opposite. I love file-based routing. Well, I guess TanStack router, I don't know about TanStack router, but TanStack start, and I guess TanStack router, they have file-based routing. So TanStack start has, I guess. I've been loving TanStack start ever since I tried it. It's file-based routing done right, although I don't mind Next.js way. Yeah, I like that it does generate this code automatically and gives me a convenient way of configuring this route. Because in Next.js, if you want to configure something, you end up exporting a bunch of stuff in Next.js, right? So you end up exporting your meta object and so on in a Next.js page. I guess, I'm not sure if you do that all here, but I guess here it's one configuration object, and I definitely prefer that. So yeah, I get what you mean with file-based routing done right. You can put a sort object inside the input validator directly. Oh, that's great. That's great. That's good to hear. Why is it async? Yeah, it's sending the to-do to the backend correctly, as I explained. And I do understand that you asked your question before I started explaining. But yeah, add to-do is running on the server. Here, we're awaiting this because there is this network request in between. I feel with all these front-end server implementations, the only thing I would have in this hybrid client is the authentication logic. You mean that's the only thing you would have to add yourself, or something you'd like to be built in? The problem with anything TanStack is that the examples show you everything right from the start. We need a book course from Max. Yeah, well, no book or course right now, but at least taking some baby steps today and exploring it, I guess, and explaining. I'll try to explain along the way what I understand. The loader here means it will run on the server, but if you navigate to another page, that will run on the client. Yep, exactly, and that's why I think we need create server function to ensure that we got some code that only runs on the server here. Have you tried type-safe routes in Next.js 15.5? No, I haven't. I have a bunch of projects which are on older versions, which I haven't updated yet. Okay, so I understand how that works. So I guess what I'll do now is let's see what's in this route here. Just for completeness sake. I guess that is a route that shows us. Okay, I get it. So demo, which originally was called differently, that is an example for a route that uses this built-in client-server communication server-side function approach. This other file, which was created right at the start, is an example for a pure client-side route, which has no server-side magic built in. Because in here, in this route, we also got a home component. We are also managing some state here. So just to show you what this is, I guess it's this route here. Yeah. No. Did it crash? I think that is not the content rendered by this route. Demo start API request. I think I should not be seeing the start server functions page because that's the other one here. Maybe because I got an error somewhere. T. implicitly has type any. Why is to-dos any? Did I crash something here? Add to-do. But I didn't change anything here, right? Did I? Shouldn't it be able to infer that? I mean, add to-do is returning. Oh, that is any. Okay, so if I do something like, what is the shape of my to-dos? ID and name. Okay, so if I do something like this, is it a number? Yeah, it is a number. Okay. Yeah, I know why I'm not a fan of all these linter rules. Still, I mean, why is to-dos any if add to-do has type information? Oh, because to-dos here. Use loader data, get to-dos. Okay, so we also need to do it here. Read to-dos. Okay, so we need to make it clear here as well. That we return JSON stringify as, no, not if I stringify it, JSON parse as this. Okay, so now we got this out of the way. So maybe now routes will work correctly. So, oh, maybe I also messed it up with my renaming here. Yeah, I guess so I think what I did is maybe because I named this demo, it caught the request for this page here as well. Funks. Okay. Demo start API request not found. Demo start API request. Why is this not found? Okay, let's totally rename this route. Okay, I don't know what it had there, but now it's working. So now this API request route is loading. Anyways, whoops, what I was saying. Yeah, it became the layout file. I see. Yeah, I'll have to dive into the routing docs to understand how these different file names work together. Anyways, so what I wanted to say is this route here has a home component, our standard React component. And here we're managing a list of names, right? So just a list of names here. Actually, we can't even manage it, I guess. But this is all client-side code here with state and use effect. And get names, which we call here, sends a standard HTTP request with the standard fetch function as it's built into the browser or provided by the browser. And we send this to this API route. And that is that API route here, which is also just a file route, but a file route without a component, instead a server handler, which handles GET requests and returns some dummy names. And if I also add max here, my expectation would be that if I reload, max is here. Okay, so that works. So I understand this. Now I will delete all these files here and just keep the root file and the index.tsx file. And in root, we also got a header component, which is in the components folder, which is a standard component. By the way, that's nice. For the links here, we got type safety. So it sees that I deleted these routes, that these are no longer valid routes. I'm getting errors. But that is fine for now. I'll delete that. And I now want to add my own route. And what I want to build here, is a simple project management app, let's say. And for that, I'll add a projects TSX file. And in the header, I'll add a link to projects. If I click there, this loads. By the way, I also would like to have some dark background. So I guess here in the root page, I'll just do it like this. And then the header, and we could use Tailwind's dark mode, but I'm fine with just everything being dark. Yeah, looks good to me. Okay, yeah, so I got an error. I fixed that, I guess. Not a question related to TanStack, but do you recommend learning React first before learning a framework? I would learn the basics of React first, but then I think it's fine to quickly dive into a framework. But you should learn the basics, of course, like the component state, props, how you build a basic site, a basic page with React and the core concepts. But then I think it's absolutely fine to dive into a framework. You just need to understand that a lot of the features you're then going to use, or a lot of conventions you'll see there, are coming from the framework, not from React. Call me old school, but I honestly just go with old school Vue or React with a separate backend. But I'm a crazy scientist exploring everything. So the single page application, or the Vue, React, whatever it is, single page application plus backend approach, I think definitely has its merits, right? So, and I'm still building a lot of projects like this. That being said, this integrated approach can also be really nice because it gets rid of certain things you otherwise have to think about, like deploying separate servers, separate applications. But yeah, it can introduce new complexities. Now, me struggling here is not necessarily a sign of TanStack Start being super complex, though. It's just a sign of me not having used it before. And of course, I'm at the very beginning of the learning curve. So obviously I'll make mistakes and I'll run into problems which I could avoid if I knew at least the bare minimum of TanStack. So yeah, I got my projects route now, and I think that's also what Max in the chat mentioned. There is this idea of, and I remember reading that because I briefly had a look at the documentation before so that I'm not totally blind. I remember that there is this concept of a layout route. Yeah, so here, creating file routes. The idea is that if I have a file named about TSX in this routes folder, it will render a page for /about, a static route. Now, if, however, I have a file with a certain name, in this case posts.tsx, and then I also have a folder with that same name, or I guess, excuse me, or I guess a file with dots instead of having folders, then this becomes a layout route. So put in other words, here, if I add a projects folder next to projects.tsx, and then in there, I guess, an index.tsx file. Yeah, index.tsx. Then this here becomes the projects page where I could list all the projects. And projects.tsx becomes the projects layout page. Now, I think the problem I would have with this setup right now is that I only see projects layout page here. Let me zoom in a bit. I only see that, and I don't see the projects page because I haven't told TanStack Start where to render the child page that should be wrapped by this layout page. So put in other words, this projects.tsx file, the component in there, this route becomes a layout route, a wrapper route around all project-related pages I store in the projects folder if I have both a file with that name and a folder with the same name. So now I need to tell TanStack Start where to render the content of those child routes, and I think I do that with an outlet. I think there is this outlet component. So my expectation would be that if I add a fragment here, and cursor already suggested that I use a outlet, yeah, ESLint, honestly, member outlet of the import should be sorted alphabetically. Go shoot yourself. I mean, in which world is this helpful? Anyways, and I know I can't change the linting setup. I will go with it for now to not waste too much time, but yeah. Now we see the projects page. So this content here, because now we're loading this. And I guess if I would add more routes here now, like a dynamic route, how do we set up dynamic routes? It is a $sign in the file name for dynamic route segments. So if I would add like a project ID file here, I guess that sets up a dynamic route. Now the question is, how do I get access to the concrete value for this dynamic segment? And I guess the place to go for that is the TanStack router documentation. Loader, I can get them in the loader through the params here. And in the component with route use params. So that would give me the project ID. So I guess now, if I go to projects ABC, I see the project page for project with ID ABC. And if I go to something else, I see that something else here. And we always have the part from the layout page. Okay, so now let's bring in Shadcn to make sure our page looks like all the others. No, just joking. Shadcn is awesome. So that we can quickly get some components. So for TanStack start, I guess Tailwind is already set up. So I guess the next step is, but post CSS is probably not. No. Okay, so let's grab this and let's run this command then to install these packages. Create a post CSS config TS file. And paste this in. And then in, I don't have an app CSS, so installs CSS. Import Tailwind source. I don't think I need to do that since Tailwind already seems to be working. Yeah, we're importing it. We're doing all that. tsconfig JSON. The path that is already set up, so we don't need to do that. It's not referring to /app, but to /source, but that is what I have here, so I'll leave it like this. We'll see if Shadcn works with that then. So let's see if that works. If it doesn't work, we'll go without it, but yeah, we'll see. Refer to the Tailwind docs for this installation. So I think Tailwind is already installed, so do I need to change anything? I think is post CSS not needed anymore? Okay. So I guess installing post CSS was not needed. And working on that config file also was not needed, I guess. But it probably also won't hurt here. Yeah, I don't need post CSS, makes perfect sense. Okay, but it did update the correct style file. That's good. And it did create the lib folder here. Okay, so it looks like that should be working. Let's see if I add a button. It should add it to components UI. I guess so. Shadcn is working here. Yeah, I can just use the Tailwinds plugin. Okay, good. Good. So installing post-CSS was not needed, and I can get rid of this config file. Good. So then with that, I got my projects here. So now we'll use some AI. I'll move that to the left now, because now in this projects file here, I want to, well, first things first, excuse me, I need one more route in my projects folder, and that is new for adding new projects. Does this not work? I didn't know, oh, because the server is not running, right? So now if I add new, okay, yeah. Okay, so in this route, I want to be able to create new projects. And for now, a project is simply a thing with a name and a description. And then we can see if we add more stuff later. So I'll use AI for that. Tell it, not GPT-5, we don't have that much time. Let's use Sonnet 4. We're building a project, basic project management app. Here's what you need to do. In add new, create a basic UI that lets users enter the details for a new project. And that would be the title and the description and something else. No, I think it's fine. Use Shadcn and Tailwind v4 for that. And I guess I can already install some Shadcn components it will need. So I'll install input, text area, card, label, anything else it will likely need. Well, I can tell it that it should install more if it needs it, but a couple of Shadcn components are already installed. See UI at see components. If you need more, install them via npx shadcn at latest add. Okay, so using some AI here so that it gives me some basic UI. You said not GPT-5, but Sonnet because we don't have time. So GPT-5 High can be good, depending for which task you use it, but it takes super long. So that's why I'm using Claude before Sonnet for generating this UI. So with that, if I go to projects new, I got this. I'll say we're using dark mode in the entire app. Please adjust the UI accordingly. MCP, yeah, Shadcn has an MCP. I haven't used it actually. So I don't know how good it is. And in my experience, the AI is quite good with Shadcn like this. Okay, so we got this UI now for creating a new project. This is super large because I'm zoomed in quite a bit, by the way. Now, of course, I want to... is there anything I want to put on this layout page? Yeah, sure, I guess. In projects, the projects layout page, add a navigation that makes switching between projects new and projects simple. And I guess that's one case where I could have also just done it myself, would probably be equally quick, but yeah. Gives me more time to read the chat, I guess. By the way, off topic, are you a fan of the arrow functions or named functions? Functions defined using const look more like variables, and I think arrow functions are better in anonymous. I 100% agree. Thank you so much. AI absolutely loves this function style, and I always end up changing it because over the years, it has not always been like this, but over the years, I really like switched to this function style. I like that, and I only use arrow functions for anonymous, just like you. Yeah. Okay, so now we got all projects, new project. Obviously, not the most fancy or exciting UI of the world, but it gets the job done, I guess. So we got this. Now, of course, I want to make sure that when I enter some details here and I click create project, I want to store that project somewhere. And we could store it in a file, but I will use a database here. And for that, I'll switch that to the right again, and I will add a new file in my lib folder, dbts, and I'll use SQLite. So I'll install Better SQLite 3, which is a nice package for working with SQL or SQLite. That being said, by the way, Node.js has built-in support for SQLite in their latest version. It's not fully stable yet, though. But we could also use just Node.js with a recent version. But here, I'll use Better SQLite. Yeah. So import from Better SQLite 3. I want to create a database, projects DB, export this DB handle, and also actually, I need to install the types. Actually, I also want to set up the database here. Is it not database what I import? Hello? Oh, it's a type? What? Oh, okay, it's not a okay, I get it. So I want to execute something. I want to create a table right at the start. I also want to execute some pragma statements for a journal mode wall. So that's something I also want to do. And then we can create a table for storing these projects. We would probably also have like a user ID in there, which we'll need to populate. Obviously, we have no users right now, but yeah, that's something we could also set in the future. But for now, let's just set up title, description, and have an ID. Auto increment is not needed in SQLite. It'll do that automatically for integer IDs. Yeah, okay, so that gives us a database handle. And now the idea is that in new, I want to set up such a server route. So I want to have my add project thing here. And of course, I could just, it's exactly the same code we saw before, essentially, right? So I'll use create server fn. By the way, there also is create server only fn. And I think the difference is that a function created with create server fn can be called from the client side. And behind the scenes, TanStack start will send an HTTP request, essentially. A function created with create server only fn cannot be called from the client side and will get an error if we try to do so. That is my understanding, at least. And you could use create server only fn if you got some code that must only run on the server. And well, I guess that's the wrong way to put it, because if you use create server fn, the code you set up there will also only run on the server. But if you have something that shouldn't be triggerable from the client side at all, so where no request should be sendable, you could say. So now input validator. So we could now use sod, install sod, and start the development server again. And I think someone mentioned that we can just set up a schema, a project schema here with C. Thank you, cursor. C. And import that, of course. Import C from sod. Object, and we want to have a title and description. And let's complete that all. And I think we can now just pass project schema to input validator. And that will automatically validate based on our sod schema and return an error. And we'll have to see what we do with that error if it fails. And then here we get data, which I guess is the validated data. That's convenient. So then we can extract title and description. And for our database, we can, well, we want to import this first of all. And then we can prepare a statement, insert into, and then run this with title and description. And better SQLite is synchronous, so we don't need to await this. And then we can return the run result. Well, I think we return a new object where the ID is the inserted row ID and title and description is what we got. So I think that should work. And then add project is now a function we can call from in here. Add project. And set our data to an object with title and description, which is that shape we expect on the server side due to this sod schema. What's the error here? Yeah, this import should occur before. Yeah, I'm so not a fan of rules like this. But okay. Well, I do actually also order my imports like this, but I'm not sure about rules like this. Anyways, async arrow. Yeah, this doesn't need to be async then, right? Okay, so in theory, we should now be creating a database and insert a project when we enter our data. So if I enter test, and this is a test project, and I click create, get no feedback because I haven't added any code for that. But in projects.db, I got 2 projects, 2 because I pressed the button twice. So that works. Pretty good. Time for chat. I'm familiar with TanStack router, but not with Start. I think Start uses router. Yeah, it does exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much regarding that hint. Oh, so I should create a projects folder and put route TSX inside it. So I guess I could do both, right? I could either have my projects TSX file and then the projects folder, because that clearly works. And you're saying the alternative is to put that in there and name it route TSX instead, right? So unless I'm seeing some old cached version, this also seems to work, yeah. Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, regarding changing those names, I always do it by typing fun, and then cursor pretty much always just suggests that I hit tab and it will change the name. Okay, so now I want to load all projects here on this index.tsx file. And again, for that, I'll get my projects by calling create server fn to create a server function. And then here for the handler, this doesn't need to be async. I will reach out to my database add that import, and select all my projects for now, and return them. Okay, and this must not be unknown. So I guess what I can do is I can add some type hint here. What's that second one again here? Oh no, the problem is this again. Array all. Still unknown. Is that not what I do with this first generic type? Prepare. Oh, is the first thing the is that the argument list? What's the problem here? All. Okay. And yeah, I just defined the type of a single element here and it automatically is an array. Good, so now we got type support. And now we would set up our loader here and load our projects like this. And that loader will execute whenever we navigate to this route, both on a client or the server side in theory, but since this is a server function, only on the server side here. And then we can again use some AI here. Now on projects index, on this index file, output a list of projects based on the loaded projects we got there. Use Shadcn components and Tailwind again. Okay. Yeah, the first one is the parameters. Yeah, never is what I was looking for, right? No. I'm actually not sure what it is here. If I don't have any, that should work though. Just passing an empty object. Yeah. Why is Better SQLite is synchronous when it deals with writing to files? So I think the thing Better SQLite does, it's a good question. I think what it does is it probably directly talks to or uses the SQLite C code, I guess. And it probably does so in a synchronous way. Yeah, there is some, like there is this C++ code in there. So I guess it is just invoking this in a synchronous way. And it's not using Node's file system APIs or anything like that, which also would have a synchronous version though. So even if it would be using Node's file system API or anything like that, it would not necessarily need to use async await. Await. Undefined. Nah, also not happy. Because the constraint is either an empty object or an unknown array, but if I enter that, I get the error that it is that is forbidden. So that's why I'm sticking to this empty object. Okay, so now we got some projects here. Obviously the ones from our database. Now I want to be able to click View Project and then be taken to the detail page. So we can already tell the AI that on the detail page, which is that with that file with the $sign project ID, create a beautiful page that outputs the project details as well as buttons for editing or deleting a project. So now I'll move that to the right side again. Now we're working on this project ID file, which is the file for this dynamic route. So when we want to view the details for a very specific project, because the idea is that view project here, this thing, takes us to that detail page. And it already does. Currently there is an error because it's work in progress. But that is the idea. Okay, I need to wait until the AI is done here, I guess. Get a bunch of errors now. Yeah, sure, alphabetically, got it. I mean, that's not the alphabet, but what do I know? Validator create server function. Yeah, it's input validator. So the AI probably has some outdated knowledge here. By the way, that would be one example for where you could go to the documentation and copy that page, that markdown, and then paste it into the chat here as extra context so that the AI knows a bit more about the correct syntax. Project ID. So what do we have here? We have get project, which wants, yeah, the ID should be a number here, first of all. And then we don't need to parse this as an int, I guess. What's the problem here? Get ID. So I got my handler. Yeah, we don't need async, of course, but what is the problem here? I have my database statement where I tell TypeScript that we'll have one parameter for this query, which is ID, which is of type number. And then we'll get back the entire entry, which includes number, ID, title, and description. So that looks good to me. Project ID is a number. No, project ID is actually this context here. Oh, okay. So we got the data here, and then we got the yeah, and then project ID. Okay, yeah, our data is the project ID. So we need to rename it. Then it works. Delete project works in the same way. So let's just accept this all, return success if we have at least one change. Get project. Okay, so now here, okay, so I need to convert my params here, I guess. So I can get my project ID with parse int. And I guess that's not necessarily the idea if I think of it, because I have my validator up there. So, because the route parameter will always be a string, of course, because the URL is a string. So actually what I'll do here is I'll switch this back. No, I will not do that. Will not parse it here. Instead, I'll revert this and say, yeah, that'll be a string what I get. But then here in the handler, I'll get my project ID by parsing my data as an int. So that's how I'll do it. Okay, so then here in the route component, where we delete that, the project ID we also need to parse that. I'll do it. Well, I'll just do it here. Or no, actually, I can also just pass the project ID as a string to delete project, and then also convert it here. And I guess we could also add more validation, but it is a string because in the URL it's always a string. Data is project ID, and down here the button to this edit page won't work because we don't have this edit route. Delete project, that should work, and then again edit project won't work. Okay, so now if I save that, if I go to a project, too few parameter values were provided. Why are there too few? I got projects and I got the ID. So this route has one dynamic parameter. So I would say that is enough. Too few parameter values. Line 23. Is it here? ID, but I only have one parameter. So I guess it's coming, yeah, it's coming from the server function. It's coming from here where I get a project. Oh, so let's do good old console log debugging. Project ID is 2, so it's available. And I do set it for the ID parameter. Oh, wait a second. Should be like this, right? Yeah. Should be like this. So the problem was I don't have a named parameter here, just a by position. So I did not want to set up like a object of parameters there, but instead just like the type of the one parameter I passed to it. Okay, so we now load that project. Obviously not a lot on that page because our project only has like a title and a description. But I guess the AI did a good job of making it seem more than it is. We got 2 delete buttons, which both trigger the same function. If I click delete, click OK, we're redirected. And now we only got one project here because if we take a look at the database, it's also only one. So deleting works. Deleting works. Okay, so I guess for our CRUD app, we already got create, we got read, we got delete. Now let's make sure we also got update by making sure we can edit this. Now for editing this, I want to open a modal dialog. So first things first, I will use Shadcn here and add the dialog component. And restart the dev server. And then again, let's use AI. Now re-add the edit button, which I commented out. Well, first I'll say I had to implement a couple of fixes. Now the code is working. I'm doing that to make sure that the AI won't change my changes back to its broken code. Now re-add the edit button. Upon clicking the button, a modal dialog should open that allows the user to change the title and description. of the project. Initially, or no, I don't need that. Yeah, let's just do that. Let's see what the AI comes up with. The get method actually works. I think it was just a parameter problem. Yeah, we don't, we can reject this and tell it already installed. Okay, I did not reject it. Anyways, so now it hopefully will continue. And we'll see what we get. In the end, I think it should be super simple, straightforward. We just need some state management to open or close the dialog. And in the dialog, we will call more server functions, or one more server function that will update the data. So it should be pretty straightforward. Window location reload. That should not be needed, I guess. Actually, it will be interesting to see what happens if there is some mechanism for automatically refreshing the page, like Remix has it. Function async function. So what do we have here? We got state for managing whether the dialog is open or not, then 2 states for keeping track of what the user entered. We could also use refs, of course, but I'm fine with the states. Is updating. Set is updating. That is probably to show a loading spinner whilst the update is in progress. Handle edit is probably triggered from inside the dialog. So here's the dialog with the dialog trigger on the edit project button and so on. Got another button which also opens the dialog. And then in the dialog, we get an input, we get a text area, we keep track of what the user entered. We got a button for canceling, which closes the dialog. And then we got a button which will submit that form, which triggers handle edit, and handle edit in the end calls update project and then closes the dialog. And update project is a new server function where we could also again define our project schema. And of course, we typically would want to define this in another file and reuse it. Here, I'll just redefine it real quick. Use my project schema here. And then I got my ID, title, description. Can use that. We update it here, where ID is the ID we selected. And we return the updated project. And now that will be interesting to see what TanStack start's behavior is here regarding that. How I make sure that the UI is in line with what I changed. Yeah, bye Max. Thanks for stopping by, and thank you so much for all the very helpful input and clarification. Much appreciated. Have a great day. Okay, so edit project opens this. Test project, save changes. Yeah, if I reload, it's here, but it's not updating automatically. It's not refreshing. And I wonder if there is a way of, well, refreshing. Like in Next.js, you have revalidate path. You have this function, and if you call that in a server action, then if you are on the page with the path you're revalidating, Next.js will automatically refresh it. It will fetch the updated data behind the scenes, so to say. I wonder how you would best do that in TanStack start. So one thing we could, of course, do is in update project, we are returning the updated project. So of course, in the component, we could now use that. We get our updated project here. We could use this updated project then to update the UI, but the problem with that is, of course, that this means we have to manage our project through state somehow. Currently, I'm getting it from my loader data, as it seems. AI wrote this code, I didn't. So that's how we get access to that loader data. And I would like to stick to this flow, because that way the loader is the only thing that fetches the data here, and I don't want to introduce another part where we get some updated data eventually. I would rather always use the loader and make sure that this loader gets triggered again if I change the state through some server function. And I just need to find out how to tell TanStack start to behave like this. So let's see. Redirects. I don't want to redirect. Yeah, they are returning some data here, but how can I make sure this gets picked up on the client side? Code execution patterns. No, not what I'm looking for. Routing, probably also not what I'm looking for. Server routes. What's a server route? Oh, that's API routes. Okay. Server entry point. So is there something on refreshing? Router invalidate. Okay, so is that what I do? Do I get my router by calling use router from TanStack router, and then I call router invalidate here on the client side? Is that how it works? Let's see, edit project. Oh, okay, that's how it works. So I found this article here with their search by searching for refresh, and there they explain how to do that. Now, obviously that is on the client side, which is fine by me. I wonder if we could also trigger this from the server function though. Not that it's important. Just something I'm wondering. But I guess you do it from the client side. Okay, so now we got that implemented then. Now we can delete projects, we can edit projects. Let's also test the description, that also works. And we can add new projects, and yes, the UI is not the world's greatest, but we got our basic CRUD app working with TanStack start now. I guess I'm just thinking about what to dive in next. Obviously, TanStack Start has tons of features. Like building a CRUD app is always what I like to do first, because even though it's super simple, it gives you all these basic building blocks you typically need, like mutations, fetching data, and so on. And we saw that all now. So as a next step, we could dive into more advanced patterns. We could, of course, also try to build a more meaningful app, but I gotta go in half an hour, so it's not too much time left. So I'd rather dive a bit deeper into the TanStack Start features. So I guess let's do that. Server functions, where we already use them. And I know there is this other kind of server function. So I read that before, that it's isomorphic by default, which simply means most code runs on both the server and the client side, and you have to explicitly tell it if some code should only run on the server side or only on the client side. That's also possible. For example, with create server fn. So server only execution can be done through these two functions here. We saw this function a lot. This function can also be called from the client side, and TanStack start will then make sure that a network request is sent. So behind the scenes, you could say it sets up an API route and also make sure a network request is sent. These server-only functions would give us an error if we try to call them from the client side. And they also give us a nice example here that you could use a server-only function to get hold of an environment variable. And I think that's a pretty good example here, because if I got my database here, right? And currently in dbts, I hard-coded that name. Now, I also have export default db. Now, what I could do is I could add a .env file here and add a db path or a db name, a database name, or a db file name, and name it projects.db so that we set this as an environment variable. Now, I do know that environment variables are loaded automatically. TanStack start automatically loads .env files. Now we want to use that in the dbts file. So what you could do, what you could be inclined to do, is that you do that, right? So we got db file name, that you try to load it like this. The problem with this approach, as I understand it, is that db is exported here, and we import that into our files. And therefore, this could end up on the client side, I think. No projects yet. Not sure why I'm getting this, but also not important right now. So I think maybe it's related to the point I'm trying to make. The problem is that this code could end up on the client side, as I understand it. So, and I might be wrong, but my understanding is that the better way of exposing this database handle, and especially also to get this environment variable value, would be to export a constant called getDB, which is a create server only function object. So an object or a function in the end created with help of create server only function, which is coming from TanStack start. There, according to their docs, we pass the function that should actually only run on the server side as a value. So not with handler, but instead like this. And now we could take all this code and put that in there. And now getDB, this code would be guaranteed to only run on the server side, because anywhere else we're getting an error, because it is a DB server only, if I could type, a server only function. So this guarantees that this code will never somehow end up in the client-side bundle and can also not be called from the client side in some way. So now in index.tsx and in all the places where I need the database, I need to import this getDB function, and I can call that from inside the server function. So indirectly, of course, it can still be called from the client side, but only through that function where I could add my authentication checks or any other checks or validation. So we call getDB here to get access to the DB handle, and then we use it just like before, but we now wrapped all that database access logic into a function that can only run on the server side. And we can therefore also only call it from inside functions that run on the server, like create server fn. And we also do that here, of course. get DB and call get DB here and in all the other places where we need to get access to the database, and then also here. Okay, so and now with that, I'm still not sure what's going wrong. What is not found error? Okay, so I guess some error somehow crashed it all again. Not found. So the only thing I changed is how we access the database. And all of a sudden, that all crashes. Let's again do good old console log debugging. Let's see if that function here is executed. So if I load my projects, getDB is executed. So this code runs. We set up our database handle, we create a new table. If it does not exist, we return the database handle. So here, we fail to fetch the projects though. If I reload, I get an empty array. But there is a project in projects.db. It is, of course, possible DB file name, projects.db. Is it not loading this? I mean, let me check. In dbts, console log db path. db path is undefined, so it's not loading this environment variable correctly, but I am doing it like they mentioned it here, right? Use it in a server-only function. And they say that .env files get loaded automatically. Why exactly would this not work? Why is it not picking up on this .env file? DB file name is the correct name, right? Yeah. So it looks like it's not loading this for some reason. Because it's not telling me that I would need to load it in any other way. So I guess in theory it should work. So if I do db file name equals projects.db npm run dev to set it like this. Okay. Router entry get router is okay. It is release candidate. There still seem to be some bugs. So now it works if I expose the environment variable like this, but loading the env file somehow didn't seem to work. Okay. But the main point anyways was, of course, that we can use such a create server only function if we have some code we want to ensure can't directly be called from the client side. But the main point I wanted to make before that is that, of course, that is the server side or the server only execution. We can also set up client only execution with create client only function. And you would do that, as they show in their example, if you, for example, want to interact with local storage or with some other browser API where you know it won't work on the server side. And then I guess you can wrap the client-only component, which is coming from the TanStack start framework, around another component that relies on client-side only code. Yeah. So if you have some component that needs to do some work that relies on some API that's not available on the browser, you can wrap that component with client only to make sure it's not getting pre-rendered on the server, which would cause an error. So if I had like a settings page here, and in there, I wanted to get my current settings by accessing local storage get item settings. And I console log that. Right now, my expectation would be that we run into an error if I go to settings. Yeah, we got an error here in our log on the server side, so to say, because local storage is not defined on the server side. Now, what we can do is, so I guess one thing I could try is get settings and use create client only function. Like this. Yeah, but now I get an error because it correctly detects that create client only can only be called on a client. So it still crashes, but that's one way of ensuring that we explicitly state which code does only run on the client side. Now, to make sure that it doesn't crash anymore, we would probably create a new component, like the settings settings menu, whatever, and move that code here into that component, so into some other component. Like that, so that now we can return this settings menu component, but we wrap it with client only, which is coming from the TanStack start framework. And with that done, now if I go to settings, I would expect it to work, and it does. I got the settings menu, and here in the console, I see null because nothing was stored in my local storage, but it no longer crashes. So I guess that's one way of ensuring, that's one way of marking code that should only work on the client side and of ensuring that it then is only loaded there. And then we also got create isomorphic function, which allows us to define both server and client versions of the same function, which I find pretty interesting. So we have create server only and create server function and create client only function. But then we got the create isomorphic function, which we can use if we have some function that should be callable on both ends, but should do different things and use different APIs on the different ends. So we would then define a server version and a client version. And on the client version, we could be using local storage, for example. In the server version, we could be using a file that's stored on the server or a database. So I think that's a pretty interesting approach to be able to define a function that does run in different environments, but also runs different code in different environments. And you can define it in a very easy way with create isomorphic function. Yeah, so that seems like a nice feature too. So that's one thing I definitely wanted to explore. Also, I want to take a look at routing real quick and understand which kind of routes they support. So that looks like a good overview. So we already saw like the root route. We saw that index is a special name, which is for slash, either on the root level or in nested folders. That if we have just a route with a certain name, we get a route with the same name. But if we have a route with a certain name and we have a folder with the same name, then this becomes a layout route. And we can then have multiple routes in there that share that layout. That is exactly what we're doing here with projects. Just that here I used route TSX for the layout route, which also seems to work, as I was told in the chat. We can, what's this trailing underscore doing? Posts. Okay, I'll have to explore that. That's a dynamic route with the $sign in there. Look at our trailing. Okay, so that is pathless. So that is a way of adding a layout and organizing route files without adding a new path to the URL, which also can sometimes be useful. And we see it here. These files, these routes in there are served for just /route A, route B, and still they are in a folder. And if that folder would not start with a leading underscore, it would be part of the path, as we see it here for settings. We got a settings folder, and then we got profile and notifications in there, and those are loaded for /settings profile and /settings notifications. I'm still not sure what the trailing underscore does, though. Yeah, and we can have flat routes. We saw that initially when I created the project, that we can have dots in a file name to not use folders. Personally, I prefer folders, but if you would want to set up a nested folder, a nested route structure, but not have nested folders, you can use dots instead of folders for creating nested paths, as we see it here. But what is that trailing underscore doing? What is that trailing? Well, underscore is a pretty broad term to search for. Route matching. Route trees. Routing concepts. Root route, basic routes, index routes, dynamic routes, catch all routes. Okay, only $sign gives us a catch all route. Optional path parameters, if we add a minus. So I think that's one problem I have with file-based routing from an aesthetics perspective. It's just not visually appealing to me to have all these weird file and folder names, but yeah. Might not matter to many people, but I'm personally not a fan of having files named like this in my project. Just doesn't look good. Maybe a horrible argument, but yeah, that's my reason for not being a huge fan of file-based routing. I like clean folder structure. Layout routes, we saw that. Yeah, there we also see that route TSX thing. Pathless layout routes, we saw that. Non-nested routes can be created by suffixing a parent. Yeah, that's the trailing underscore. Are used to unnest a route. Consider the following flat route tree. Posts, post ID, posts underscore post ID. The following table shows which component will be rendered based on the URL. So this one here with the trailing underscore. The post route is nested as normal under post TSX and will render. Oh, I get it. So that is related to layouts, right? Yeah, okay, I see. So this route with the trailing underscore will not use this shared parent layout route here. Okay, I see. So if you want to opt out of a shared layout for a specific route, you can suffix it with an underscore. Excluding files and folders. Oh, that's neat. So here in this example, the settings menu, because that's one thing I'm not a huge fan of. By the way, that should have this import. I'm not a huge fan of putting route-specific components in a shared general components folder. I also want to rename this to header so that it's in line. And therefore, what we could do is we could go to our settings. We could add a settings folder, for example, and move settings in there and rename it to index. And then have minus components in there, which again is horrible for my eyes. But what's good is that now we get a folder that opts out of routing. So the files in there will not be treated as routes, but it now co-locates the components that belong to a certain route next to that route. So I guess with that, if I reload my settings menu, it still all works, but now I have a nice way of organizing the components that belong to the route next to the route by using this special naming syntax for opting out of routing. So that's good to know. Excluding files and folders. Pathless route group directories. Yeah, I know this from Next.js. You can wrap a folder, and I guess also if you use dots, a part of a file name with brackets. And if you do so, you have a way of grouping routes together that are treated as routes, grouping files together that are treated as routes, without adding a new path. So even though these are all in the app folder, since this is wrapped with brackets, this will not be loaded for app dashboard, app settings, app users, but instead just for /dashboard, /settings. And still you have a way of grouping them. And I guess also of providing a shared layout if you wanted to. Yeah, I mean, we had pathless layout routes before already. Yeah. Okay, so we got that. Sure. Path params, I saw that you get access to it with route use params for the dynamic routes. And we can also get access in non-route components with the use params hook. We can navigate by keeping the params placeholder in the link and setting params like this. Are we doing that here? In index where I fetch all my projects? Yeah. So that is the route path to the project detail route, but the concrete value for project ID is actually set with help of the params prop here. Got it. I mean, you could spend an entire day just reading TanStack router docs. It's such a huge library with so many features. But I get the general idea now, I guess. Search params. This is React. This is React just using the TanStack Start framework, which builds up on React. And I think it only exists for React. Yeah. Oh, for Solid too. I guess TanStack Start is a framework that can also be used with Solid, as it seems. But I guess it's mostly known for its React support. This is React.js, yeah. But yeah, I think that's a good point to stop because I gotta go in 5 minutes anyways. And we had a thorough look. All good, all good. Unfortunately, I just have to go right now. So yeah, we had a thorough look at the base features, at how to create a project with TanStack Start, having all those CRUD operations. And as always, of course, this recording will go live on my second YouTube channel, Maximilian Extended, tomorrow. So that is youtube.com/@Maximilian-extended. I will upload it there tomorrow. I will also put a GitHub link to this project which we built here into the description of that video, of course. And yeah, TanStack start. It was the first time I had a look at it too. Definitely always takes some time to get into it. Looks interesting. Still seems to have some rough edges to me, like these weird errors or where it was stuck in some state. I was missing some clearer error messages here and there, I guess. But then again, I was playing around with it for the first time. I have no experience with it. I hope nonetheless this was helpful, was interesting, and I'd love to see you back in future streams. I wish you a great day, morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is for you. And yeah, see you in the future, hopefully. Bye.